I will state the facts as I recorded them. The directorate has requested a clinical account, and I intend to provide one. If the account reads as something other than clinical by the time it is finished, that is the data talking, not me. My name is Kiveth Sorn. I hold the rank of Senior Research at Serathi Xenobiological Survey Division, Serathi Directorate of Catalogued Organisms. For 11 years I have served aboard the survey vessel Catherine Voss, a deep-range biological collection platform assigned to the Deathworld corridor. The Catherine Voss is not a warship. It carries no armament beyond standard debris deflection arrays. Its crew of 209 is composed entirely of researchers, technicians, specimen handling specialists, and support staff. We collect, we classify, we index. That is all we do, and we have done it without significant incident for 37 consecutive survey rotations. I say without significant incident because the directorate uses that phrase in its annual compliance reports, and because it was, until recently, accurate. The Catherine Voss is a Serathi vessel, crewed almost entirely by Serathi. For those unfamiliar with our biology, I will note the relevant details because the biology matters. We are chitinous. Our exoskeletons are segmented and blue-tinted, darkening with age and calcite deposition. We have compound eyes, wide field, low depth, and 4 mandibular plates that serve both feeding and secondary communication functions. A Serathi can convey disagreement, alarm, concentration, and submission through mandibular positioning alone, without vocalizing. We are 6-limbed, 4 ambulatory, 2 manipulatory. Our internal temperature regulation is passive and environment dependent, which is why the Catherine Voss maintains a ship-wide ambient of 11 degrees, and why the containment wing's warming protocols are classified as an assignment hazard. We also produce alarm pheromones. This is involuntary. When a Serathi perceives a predator-scale threat, a large warm-blooded organism at close range, for instance, the thoracic spiracles release a chemical marker that signals the rest of the crew. The signal is not optional. It is not suppressible. It is a deep substrate autonomic function inherited from a colonial ancestor species that used chemical alarm cascades to coordinate hive defense. In a modern Serathi, the cascade produces elevated mandibular tension, narrowed spiracle cycling, and a sharp increase in locomotor readiness. In an enclosed environment, a ship corridor, for instance, the pheromone propagates through the ventilation system and triggers the same response in every Serathi within range. One individual's alarm becomes the crew's alarm, regardless of whether the crew has seen the stimulus. I emphasize this because it is the foundation of everything that follows. Our alarm response is chemical, involuntary, and contagious. We cannot suppress it. We cannot habituate to it. And any organism that triggers it cannot be in proximity to a Serathi crew without producing a physiological environment that degrades our operational capacity. This is why we needed a human. The Catherine Voss operates on a 12-month survey rotation through the Deathworld corridor, collecting biological specimens from catalogued and uncatalogued worlds for classification, study, and archival. The corridor contains 63 catalogued worlds and an estimated 41 uncatalogued bodies across 9 star systems. Most of our specimens are small invertebrates, microorganisms, simple vegetation. We sedate them, contain them, study them, and either preserve them for the archive or return them to their origin worlds. The work is methodical. The Serathi Directorate of Catalogued Organisms has built the most comprehensive xenobiological archive in the corridor using this methodology, and we are quietly proud of it, though the word proud does not appear in any official documentation. Specimen 12 was not small. The capture team brought it aboard on day 31 of the current survey rotation, collected from the upper temperate band of Catherine Voss, a world rated Category 19 for its gravitational density, atmospheric volatility, and apex predator saturation. Category 19 is the third highest environmental rating in the Serathi hazard taxonomy. No Serathi has ever set foot on a Category 19 world. The capture was conducted by a contracted Keth retrieval crew operating in mechanized environmental suits, and their report ran to 14 pages. I will summarize. The organism was a six-limbed endotherm, subadult, approximately 90 kilograms. Dense thermal pelt, dark brown, coarse-fibered, matted with the mineral dust of its native substrate, over a layered musculature adapted to 1.4 standard gravities. Forelimbs prehensile, rear limbs load-bearing, middle pair serving balance and secondary grip. Dentition omnivorous but heavily reinforced, high-calcium enamel, double root anchorage, designed to process material that would fracture a Serathi mandible on contact. Eyes forward set, binocular, amber, with a reflective tapetum that flared in low light. Vocalizations ranged from audible mid-frequency calls to subsonic emissions measured at 11 to 18 Hz, below the Serathi auditory floor. We could not hear the specimen. We could feel it. It was, by every metric in our classification system, a predator. The capture team noted that sedation had required 3 rounds because the organism metabolized the first 2 doses faster than the chemical could propagate through its circulatory system. The containment transfer required a reinforced harness rated for 1,200 kilograms of dynamic load, and the organism nearly exceeded it during a single spasm of partial consciousness. 2 capture specialists reported exoskeletal microfractures. 1 requested medical leave. When Specimen 12 arrived on Deck 4, every Serathi on the containment level produced alarm pheromone within 4 minutes. The cascade propagated through ventilation in under 9. 43 crew members on adjacent decks reported involuntary mandibular lock. The specimen was sedated, restrained, and sealed inside a Class 4 biocontainment chamber with triple redundant atmospheric barriers, and none of this mattered to the spiracles. The warm blood signature alone, arresting metabolic output equivalent to a small industrial heating element, triggered every alarm pathway our biology possesses. I have cataloged organisms from 206 worlds. I have handled venomous, corrosive, radioactive, and parasitic specimens without producing a single alarm marker. Specimen 12 made my mandibles lock from 14 meters away through 2 sealed bulkheads. I could not control it. The chemistry is older than conscious thought. Since arrival, the specimen exhibited sustained high-stress behavior, pacing, vocalizing, refusing nutrient intake, striking the containment barrier with its forelimbs at irregular intervals hard enough to dent the interior paneling. Its cortisol analog levels, measured via atmospheric sampling, were 600% above capture baseline. It had not slept for more than 40 consecutive minutes. It had not eaten. The research team, my team, could not approach the chamber without triggering a full threat display. Raised forelimbs, exposed dentition, the 18 Hz subsonic vocalization that vibrated the deck plates and pressed against the thoracic cavity. Several junior researchers reported nausea. Researcher Sethan Kaas, our acoustic specialist, noted that 18 Hz corresponded to territorial aggression, maximum intensity in the behavioral taxonomy. And no Serathi could remain on Deck 4 for more than 40 minutes without measurable autonomic impairment. This is the environment into which we assign the human. His name was Torin Gale. Grade 2 custodial technician, exchange program, administrative attachment code Forveth 1137. He had been aboard the Kethren Voss for 7 months, assigned to general maintenance on the lower decks, atmospheric filter replacement, waste cycling calibration, deck plate cleaning. He was 26 years old by the human developmental scale, not large for his species, quiet. His shift reports were filed on time and without annotation. His quarterly performance reviews were unremarkable in every category. His dietary requirements had been accommodated by the quartermaster, with a notation that the human's caloric intake was approximately 3 times the Serathi median, attributed to his endothermic metabolism. His origin file listed Class 15, Serathi Xen. The exchange program coordinator had processed his assignment with the standard hazard annotation, Deathworld origin personnel, physiological resilience above median, no supplementary containment required. I had seen Technician Gale perhaps 3 times in 7 months. He cleaned the lower deck atmospheric filters. He ate in the maintenance galley. He said very little. When he spoke, it was to confirm task completion or request replacement stock. He used the formal Serathi address structure without error. His accent was noticeable but not obstructive. I would not have thought about him at all if the containment wing had not needed someone who could work in 28-degree air, saturated with alarm pheromone, without losing mandibular control. The containment wing occupies Deck 4, port side. 12 biocontainment chambers, each independently atmosphered, plus a central observation corridor, a sample processing laboratory, and an atmospheric control station. After Specimen 12's arrival, the wing's ambient temperature was raised to 28 degrees to approximate the organism's native thermal range. At 28 degrees, Serathi exoskeletal flexibility exceeds the operational threshold. Mandibular response time slows. Fine motor coordination degrades. Combined with the pheromone saturation, the wing became an environment in which no Serathi could function reliably for extended periods. Specimen maintenance requires continuous custodial presence, atmospheric controls, nutrient dispensers, waste cycling, camera maintenance, deck cleaning, routine tasks that no Serathi technician could perform. Senior Technician Serathi Xen submitted the reassignment request on day 3. Technician Gale accepted without comment. He moved his maintenance locker to the containment wing's service alcove on day 4. I observed his initial entry on the corridor camera the following morning. He walked into the containment wing at the start of his shift, carrying his standard maintenance kit and a thermos of something hot, a dark liquid the quartermaster's records identified as a stimulant beverage common to human diets. He checked the atmospheric readouts on the central panel. He inspected each nutrient dispenser in sequence. He cleaned the observation corridor's deck plates with the methodical, unhurried stroke pattern of a technician who has cleaned many decks. He replaced a humidity sensor on chamber 7. He defogged the camera lenses on chambers 9 through 12. He performed each task at the same pace, in the same order, without pausing at chamber 12. He did not look at the specimen longer than he looked at any other chamber. He did not speak. He did not produce alarm pheromone. Humans do not have spiracles and do not participate in chemical signaling. But the containment wing's pheromone sensors, calibrated to detect Serathi alarm output, registered nothing from the human. The wing's chemical environment, for the first time since Specimen 12's arrival, was neutral. Specimen 12 noticed. I do not mean it noticed in the way a predator notices prey, or a captive notices a captor. I mean that the specimen, which had spent 6 days producing continuous threat display vocalizations whenever a Serathi entered the corridor, went quiet when the human walked past. Not silent, its vocalizations dropped from 18 Hz to 15, then to 14, over the course of the human's first shift. By the end of his second shift, the frequency was 13 Hz. By the end of his third, 12. On the morning of day 5, I reviewed the overnight atmospheric data and found the anomaly. Cortisol analog readings for chamber 12 had dropped by 31%. No procedural intervention. No environmental change. The only variable was the human's presence on a 6-hour shift cycle in the adjacent corridor. I flagged the reading and moved on. Anomalies in stress data are common during acclimatization. I did not attribute significance. By day 8, the cortisol drop had reached 44%. The specimen's pacing had decreased to 2 circuits per hour, down from continuous. It was positioning itself closer to the observation panel during the human shifts, not pressing against it, but orienting toward it from a distance of approximately 2 meters. By day 12, the cortisol reading had dropped by 57%. Specimen 12 had begun eating. I reviewed the camera footage methodically. On day 9, approximately 3 hours into Technician Gale's shift, the specimen approached the observation panel for the first time. It moved slowly, without threat display, no raised forelimbs, no exposed dentition, no 18 Hz vocalization. It placed one forelimb against the transparent barrier and held it there. The human was on the other side, cleaning the deck. He stopped. He set down his cleaning tool. He looked at the specimen. He did not move. He did not speak. He held eye contact, binocular to binocular, forward-set predator optics meeting forward-set predator optics, a configuration that in most species signals either threat or recognition, for approximately 90 seconds. Then he picked up his tool and went back to cleaning the deck. The specimen returned to the rear of its chamber. It ate for the first time in 9 days. It slept for 3 hours, the longest uninterrupted sleep period we had recorded. Over the following weeks, the pattern clarified. I reviewed the footage daily, then twice daily, then in real time. I could not stop watching. The data was too clean. The specimen's stress levels decreased during the human's shift and increased during his off hours. Not gradually, the inflection points mapped precisely to his arrival and departure times. Its feeding became regular, aligned not with its own circadian rhythm but with the human's shift schedule. It ate when he arrived. It ate when he ate. When he sat in the corridor during his break, drinking from his thermos and reading maintenance documentation on his data pad, the specimen settled at the observation panel and watched him. On day 14, the specimen began pressing its forelimb against the panel during every one of the human's breaks. The human, seated against the opposite wall of the corridor, would look up from his data pad, hold eye contact for 30 to 60 seconds and return to his reading. No change in posture, no change in expression, no change in heart rate. On day 17, the specimen was already at the panel when the human arrived for his shift. It had moved there during the hour before his scheduled arrival. It was anticipating his presence. On day 19, the human adjusted his break schedule. Instead of eating in the service alcove, which was out of line of sight from chamber 12, he began eating on the corridor floor directly outside the observation panel. He brought a sealed container of food, set his thermos beside him, and ate in full view of the specimen. The specimen ate at the same time, consuming its nutrient dispenser output while positioned at the panel, approximately 1 meter from the human, separated by the containment barrier. Researcher Koss noted that the specimen's subsonic vocalizations during these shared feeding intervals dropped to a frequency band, 11 to 13 Hz, that did not correspond to any behavioral state in our classification library. She tagged it as unclassified, possibly social, and added a notation. Harmonic structure suggests communicative function, insufficient data for classification. On day 22, I went to ask the human about it. I walked the length of the containment corridor, 11 minutes of exposure to the thermal environment, and 3 distinct waves of involuntary alarm pheromone that I could not suppress. He was in the service alcove, recalibrating a humidity sensor. He noticed my approach. He opened the service alcove's ventilation panel before I arrived, allowing cooler air from the maintenance duct to circulate into the space where I would be standing. He did not comment on it. Technician Gale. The specimen in chamber 12 has altered its behavioral pattern since your assignment to this wing. Have you done anything to it? He looked at me with an expression I believe is called neutral. No, sir, he said. I clean the corridor, I maintain the equipment, I monitor the atmospheric readings. You have not interacted with the specimen. I sit outside the chamber during my break. It comes to the panel. I don't touch anything. Why does it come to the panel? He set down the humidity sensor and the calibration tool. He considered the question the way he considered maintenance tasks, without rush, without apparent concern. "Because I'm warm," he said, "and I'm quiet. And I don't smell like I'm afraid of it." His heart rate, per the medical monitor in his exchange program identification band, was 62 beats per minute. It had not changed during our conversation. The specimen, 14 meters away in its sealed chamber, was watching us, forelimbs folded, vocalizations in the 11 Hz band. Researcher Koss later tagged this specific frequency as attentive rest. I returned to the research deck and filed my observations. I recommended continued monitoring. I did not recommend intervention. This was the point at which I should have understood what I was looking at. The data was clear. A 90-kilogram predator from a Category 19 world had voluntarily altered its behavior in response to one individual. Not a researcher, not a handler, not a behavioral specialist, but a custodial technician whose only qualification was a biology that did not produce fear. The variable was not the environment. It was not the specimen. It was the human substrate, warm-blooded, non-pheromonal, low stress, calibrated by a Class 15 origin world to register a Category 19 predator as unremarkable. I cataloged the observation. I indexed it. That is what Serathi do with data we do not understand. We file it and assume the index will explain it later. The weeks that followed produced data I could catalog but not contain. On day 26, the specimen began vocalizing at a new frequency, 10 Hz, exclusively during the human's arrival. Researcher Koss called it a greeting call and immediately retracted the term in her notes, replacing it with arrival-correlated vocalization, possible social function. The retraction was appropriate. The original term was accurate. On day 29, a minor malfunction in Chamber 12's waste cycling unit required Technician Gale to open the external maintenance hatch, a small panel on the chamber's lower rear wall, separated from the interior by a secondary containment membrane. The specimen could not reach him. It could not see him. But the acoustic sensors recorded a sustained 9 Hz vocalization for the full 11 minutes of the repair, a frequency lower than anything in our behavioral library, produced continuously while the human's hands were working on the other side of the wall. When he closed the hatch and walked back to the corridor, the specimen was at the observation panel. It remained there for 2 hours after his departure. On day 33, I reviewed the feeding data and found a pattern I had missed. The specimen's nutrient consumption had not merely resumed. It had organized itself around the human's shift schedule with a precision that exceeded its own circadian rhythm. It ate within 15 minutes of his arrival. It ate again during his break, when he ate. It consumed its evening supplement within 30 minutes of his departure, as though the departure itself triggered a preparatory behavior. Eat now, because the next period will be spent alone. I ran the correlation. The coefficient was 0.94. I have spent 11 years in xenobiological survey work. I have never produced a behavioral correlation above 0.8 in a captive specimen. I filed the number. I did not discuss it with the research team. On day 38, the specimen did something I could not index at all. Technician Gale was seated in the corridor during his break, eating his meal, data pad propped against his maintenance kit. The specimen was in its standard position at the observation panel, forelimb against the barrier. Gale finished his meal, sealed the container, and began reading. The specimen watched him for approximately 4 minutes. I timed it on the footage, and then it lay down. It placed its forelimbs flat against the deck, lowered its head, and closed its eyes. The posture was not defensive. It was not anticipatory. It was, by every behavioral metric I could apply, sleep posture. It fell asleep at the observation panel, 1 meter from the human, in the middle of the day. A 90-kilogram predator from a Category 19 world, whose species occupies the apex of a food chain on a planet that has killed 3 Serathi survey expeditions, went to sleep at midday in a containment chamber because a custodial technician was sitting on the other side of the wall reading maintenance documentation. Its heart rate during this sleep period was the lowest we had recorded, 31 beats per minute, a depressed metric that researcher Koss noted the organism had not achieved in any overnight recording since capture. The human glanced up from his data pad, looked at the sleeping specimen, and returned to his reading. His heart rate was 60 beats per minute. I added the footage to the behavioral archive. I did not add my own observation, which was this: the specimen had determined that it was safe to be unconscious in the human's proximity. In a predatory endotherm, voluntary unconsciousness in the presence of another large organism is not a behavioral anomaly. It is a declaration. The animal's threat assessment system, a system refined across millions of years of apex predator evolution on a Category 19 world, had classified the human as something that did not need to be watched while sleeping. I had no category for that classification. The Serathi behavioral taxonomy does not include a term for what one predator becomes to another when fear is removed and proximity is chosen. We catalog organisms. We do not catalog relationships. The index did not explain it. What happened next did. The research program for Specimen 12 had been approved before its capture. The directorate's survey protocol for Category 19 endotherms follows a standard sequence: behavioral observation, 30 days, non-invasive biometric mapping, 15 days, tissue sampling, 3 sessions, neural pathway mapping, 2 sessions, and for specimens of sufficient value, terminal vivisection of the central nervous system for preservation and study. We had conducted identical programs on specimens from 112 worlds. The sequence is efficient. It produces comprehensive data. It is what we do. Behavioral observation proceeded well, because Technician Gale's presence had stabilized the specimen enough to produce usable data. The research team could enter the corridor, briefly, in pairs, with alarm pheromone suppressants, and conduct visual assessments. The specimen tolerated our presence as long as the human was also in the corridor. When he was absent, the threat displays resumed. Non-invasive biometric mapping required sedation. 3 sessions, days 41, 48, and 53. The organism's metabolic clearance rate was extraordinary. Each sedation required 2 rounds. During the sessions, Technician Gale was on standard rotation elsewhere in the vessel. After each session, stress levels spiked. Cortisol analog readings exceeded pre-acclimatization baselines for 18 to 26 hours. Feeding ceased. The vocalizations returned to 18 Hz. The observation panel behavior stopped. It took Technician Gale approximately 3 shifts to bring the readings back down each time. He did not do anything differently. He cleaned the corridor. He sat during his break. He held eye contact when the specimen approached. His heart rate stayed in the low 60s. The specimen's stress curve declined on the same gradient it had established during initial acclimatization, and the 11 Hz vocalizations returned. I noted this pattern. I attributed it to standard post-sedation recovery. I did not ask what it might mean that the specimen's recovery was tied to one individual's presence. On day 56, between biometric sessions, something happened that I did not include in the official data logs because I did not know how to classify it. The specimen was at the observation panel during Technician Gale's break. The human was seated on the corridor floor drinking from his thermos. He set the thermos down, reached into his maintenance kit and produced a small object, a worn, flat disc of some dark material, smooth-edged, small enough to close his hand around. He held it up to the observation panel. The specimen looked at it. The human turned the object over slowly, as though showing the specimen its contours. Then he placed it on the deck beside his thermos and continued eating. The specimen sat at the panel for the full duration of the break, its forelimb against the barrier, its eyes tracking between the human and the small object. When I reviewed the quartermaster's records later, I found no entry for the item. It was personal. A stone, perhaps, or some artifact from his origin world. He had shown it to the specimen, the way one shows a possession to a companion, not for reaction, but for inclusion. I watched this on the camera feed. I did not include it in the behavioral database because I could not determine a measurable output. The specimen's stress markers did not change. Its vocalizations did not shift. Nothing happened that my instruments could quantify. But I watched a human show a personal object to a captive predator through a containment barrier, and I understood that I was watching something my instruments were not designed to measure. Tissue sampling began on day 64. The specimen is sedated, restrained, and small sections of dermal tissue, muscle fiber, and organ-lining membrane are collected through ports in the containment barrier using precision extraction instruments. 90 minutes per session. Tissue damage minimal by Serathi veterinary standards. The procedure has been conducted thousands of times across the directorate's survey history without deviation. Specimen 12's response to the first tissue sampling session was severe. Cortisol analog readings spiked to 900% of baseline. The organism struck the containment barrier 43 times in the first hour after regaining consciousness, hard enough that the impact sensors on the chamber exterior triggered a structural integrity alert. It opened a wound on its right forelimb from the repeated contact. It pulled at the tissue sampling sites with its prehensile digits until the dermal sealant failed and the collection wounds reopened. It did not eat for 4 days. Its vocalizations returned to 18 Hz and stayed there, continuous, for 31 hours. A subsonic frequency we could not hear but that 3 separate crew members on adjacent decks reported as headache and nausea. It did not approach the observation panel. When technician Gale sat outside the chamber during his break, the specimen remained in the rear corner, forelimbs wrapped around itself, facing the wall. The human sat there for the full duration of his break anyway. He ate his meal. He drank from his thermos. He did not attempt to attract the specimen's attention. He simply occupied the space. It took 5 shifts, 30 hours of the human's presence, before the specimen turned to face the panel again. Another 2 shifts before it approached. When it finally pressed its forelimb against the barrier, the human placed his hand on the opposite side and held it there for 6 minutes without moving. Technician Gale filed a maintenance observation the following morning. The document reads: Maintenance observation, containment wing, chamber 12. Specimen atmospheric stress markers exceed equipment tolerance thresholds for continuous monitoring. Nutrient dispenser cycling has been suspended by the specimen's refusal to feed. Observation panel surface requires repair after repeated impact. Recommend suspension of procedures pending return to baseline atmospheric readings. T. Gale, Grade 2 Custodial, Stamp 4VETH 1137. Senior Technician Varath Sen forwarded it to the Research Division with the annotation, Custodial input, no action required. I read it. I noted that the atmospheric data was accurate. I filed it. The second tissue sampling session was conducted on day 71. The results were worse. Cortisol levels exceeded the sensor's calibrated range. The instrument could not measure how distressed the organism was because the distress exceeded the parameters it was designed to record. The specimen refused to eat for 6 days. It stopped approaching the observation panel entirely. The 11 Hz vocalization ceased. The acoustic profile reverted to 18 Hz, then went silent. Silence was worse. Researcher Koss noted that a complete cessation of vocalizations in a social endotherm correlates with withdrawal behavioral shutdown consistent with chronic distress exceeding adaptive capacity. She used the phrase in her field notes. I read it. I did not act on it. Technician Gale filed a second maintenance observation. This one was longer. It cited specific atmospheric readings, nutrient dispenser uptake data, and a correlation analysis between procedure dates and stress marker escalation that he had constructed using the containment wing's environmental monitoring system, a custodial tool designed for humidity and temperature management, not behavioral research. The analysis was methodologically competent. I will state this for the record because the directorate should know. A Grade 2 custodial technician, using maintenance-grade instrumentation, had built a behavioral dataset that correlated procedural interventions with physiological degradation more clearly than anything my research team had produced. His data was clean. His correlations were documented. His recommendation was the same: suspend procedures pending return to baseline. Senior technician Serathi Xenobiology forwarded it with the same annotation: custodial input, no action required. I am recording this for the directorate's review, and I will not omit my role. The data was in front of me. The pattern was clear. I did not act because the observations came through a maintenance channel from a custodial technician, and in our institutional hierarchy, custodial input does not carry research weight. The system filtered the signal. I should explain how the system does this, because the directorate should understand the mechanism by which its own infrastructure failed. A Serathi research vessel operates on a hierarchy of credentialed authority. Data produced by research-grade instruments, analyzed by research-credentialed personnel, and submitted through research channels is classified as primary evidence. Data produced by any other instrument, analyzed by any other personnel, submitted through any other channel, maintenance, custodial, quartermaster, navigation, is classified as supplementary input. Supplementary input is filed. It is archived. It is not, by standard operating protocol, reviewed during active research programs unless a research-credentialed officer requests it. This is efficient. In 11 years of survey work, I have never seen it produce a failure of this magnitude. The system is designed to prevent interference from unqualified sources. It did not account for the possibility that the most qualified observer of a cross-species behavioral phenomenon would be a custodial technician who spent more hours in proximity to the specimen than any researcher, who, in fact, spent more hours with it than all researchers combined. Technician Gale had logged 642 hours in the containment wing by day 71. My team had logged 87, collectively, in supervised intervals of 40 minutes or less. He was not a researcher. He was also not wrong. The system cannot hold both of these facts simultaneously, so it discarded the second. Neural pathway mapping was conducted on days 78 and 85. These are more involved than tissue sampling, deep sedation, cranial immobilization. Microfilament probes inserted through the skull into the neural tissue, mapping electrical activity across the brain structure over a 4-hour session. The probes produce localized inflammation that persists for days and that the organism cannot reach to address. The discomfort is significant even under sedation. The body registers the intrusion at a level below conscious experience and responds accordingly. After the first neural mapping session, the specimen's self-injury behavior escalated. It struck the containment barrier until its right forelimb swelled visibly on the camera feed. It pressed itself into the rear corner of the chamber and did not move for 9 hours. Its vocalizations dropped below our instrument's detection threshold, not silence, but something so low that the acoustic sensors could not measure it. Researcher Koss believed it was still vocalizing. She said the deck plates carried a vibration she could feel through her ambulatory limbs but could not quantify. After the second session, the specimen stopped vocalizing entirely. It sat in the rear corner, facing the wall. It did not eat. It did not approach the panel. Its cortisol analog readings stopped spiking because they had plateaued at a level researcher Koss classified as chronic distress baseline. The organism had stopped reacting to individual stressors, because its resting state was indistinguishable from acute stress. Technician Gale did not file a third maintenance observation. The absence was itself a data point. I checked the cameras. He was still performing his duties, cleaning, maintaining, replacing, defogging. During his breaks, he sat outside chamber 12. The specimen did not approach. The human sat there anyway every shift, eating his meal, drinking from his thermos, reading his data pad, in the corridor outside a chamber whose occupant would not look at him. On day 87, he placed one hand flat against the observation panel. He held it there for 4 minutes. The specimen did not move. On day 88, 7 minutes. On day 89, 11 minutes. The specimen's head turned slightly, approximately 15 degrees toward the panel, and stopped. On day 90, the specimen turned fully and looked at him. It did not approach. It looked at him from across the chamber 4 meters, the full width of the containment space, and the human held eye contact, his hand flat on the panel, his body still, his breathing steady and even for 11 minutes. On day 91, it approached. It crossed the chamber slowly, 1 step, a pause, another step, a pause, and pressed its forelimb against the barrier opposite his hand. Its vocalization was 9 Hz, below any frequency we had previously recorded. Researcher Kass, reviewing the data the following morning, did not have a classification for it. She entered it into the acoustic log as unclassified 9 Hz, context, reunification after extended separation. The human's heart rate was 59 beats per minute, lower than his resting average. I watched this on the camera feed from my research station, through 2 sealed bulkheads, and my mandibles locked, not from alarm pheromone, from something I did not have a classification for either. The data from the days that followed was, in clinical terms, the most significant behavioral record the Catherine Voss had produced in 37 survey rotations. The specimen's 9 Hz vocalization, the one researcher Kass had tagged as reunification after extended separation, became its default, not during the human's shifts only, continuously. The overnight acoustic data showed 9 Hz, sustained, from the moment the human departed to the moment he returned. Previously, the specimen's off-shift behavior had reverted to higher frequencies, 14, 15, sometimes 18 Hz in the days after procedures. Now it maintained the lowest frequency we had recorded through the night, alone in the chamber, as though the reconnection had altered something in its behavioral baseline that could not be reset by the human's absence. Researcher Kass came to my station on day 92. She did not sit. She stood in the doorway, mandibles cycling in the slow, irregular pattern that indicates a Serathi is processing information that does not fit the available framework. "The specimen's acoustic profile has changed," she said. "I know, 9 Hz continuous." Not that. She placed a data pad on my desk. This. She had isolated a harmonic structure within the 9 Hz vocalization, a secondary oscillation, nearly inaudible, riding the primary frequency the way an undertone rides a chord. The secondary frequency was 4.2 Hz. It did not match any entry in the Serathi acoustic behavioral database. Kass had run it against 17 comparative taxonomies from other xenobiological archives. No match. "What is it?" I asked. She looked at me with her wide, compound eyes, and her mandibles moved in a gesture I had never seen from a colleague of her composure. It was the Serathi equivalent of a shrug. "I believe it is the sound an organism makes," she said, "when it has decided to trust someone who cannot hear it." I did not include her interpretation in the official data. I included the frequency measurement. The interpretation, however, has stayed with me. On day 93, the directorate approved the terminal procedure. Specimen 12 was scheduled for vivisection, full neural cluster harvest, on day 98. Division Chief Korath Vel signed the approval. Research Coordinator Sethin Moore countersigned. The procedural calendar was updated. The notification was distributed to all research and support staff on the containment level, including Technician Gale. I did not observe his reaction. The service alcove camera was angled toward the workbench, not the data terminal. His shift log for day 93 was filed on time, without annotation. Custodial tasks completed to standard. On day 94, during his break, he was not eating. He was reading the Serathi Containment Wing Operations Manual, Section 14, Emergency Atmospheric Protocols. The data pad screen was visible on the camera. He read it slowly. He read it completely. On day 95, he read Section 14 again, and Section 22, Maintenance Lockdown Procedures. On day 96, he read Section 22 a third time. He accessed the Atmospheric Control Station's maintenance terminal and reviewed the access code architecture, which inputs are custodial grade, which are research grade, which are command grade, and the override hierarchy between them. He spent 40 minutes on the terminal. He took no notes. His heart rate was 60 beats per minute. I noted this in my field log as custodial technician reviewing operational documentation. I did not flag it as significant. I should have. The pattern was, in retrospect, unmistakable. He was reading the same sections of the manual that governed atmospheric emergency lockdown authority. He was reviewing the code hierarchy that determined who could seal a wing and who could override it. He was doing this for 3 consecutive days, during his break, in the corridor outside a chamber containing an organism scheduled for vivisection in 2 days. I did not flag it, I cataloged it. On day 97, the day before the vivisection, Technician Gale filed a document at 22:14 ship time, 4 hours after the end of his shift. It was a containment wing atmospheric recalibration request, Form 14C, citing Section 14, Subsection 3, Paragraph 8. Any containment wing custodial technician holding Grade 2 or above may initiate an atmospheric recalibration lockdown upon documented evidence of atmospheric parameter deviation exceeding operational tolerances. The form cited 14 data points: humidity variance in chamber 12, 2.3% above nominal; temperature microfluctuation across the corridor, 0.4 degrees outside the calibrated band; particulate count in the atmospheric cycling system, 11% above the quarterly maintenance threshold. Every data point was accurate. I verified them afterward. The deviations were minor within the range addressed during scheduled maintenance, not emergency protocols. But the form did not require the deviations to be critical. It required them to exceed operational tolerances. They did, marginally, technically, precisely enough. Every field completed, every citation accurate, supporting data attached, custodial credentials stamped. I did not see it until the next morning. Day 98. 0640. I arrived at the containment wing with the full research team, myself, researcher Koss, 2 junior specimen handling technicians, and Division Chief Korath Vel, who had come to observe the neural extraction personally. We carried the sedation kit, the cranial stabilization rig, the sterile field generator, the neural extraction instruments, and 4 liters of preservation media in a temperature-controlled case. The containment wing door was sealed. The status panel displayed a yellow maintenance indicator. Atmospheric recalibration in progress. Authorized personnel only, custodial access. Division Chief Korath Vel entered his research-grade access code. The panel rejected it. He entered it again. Rejected. I entered my code. Rejected. The panel displayed: maintenance lockdown active, research access suspended per Section 14, Subsection 3, custodial override in effect. I understood, in that moment, what had happened. The containment wing's access hierarchy is a safety protocol. In an atmospheric emergency, custodial codes, held by the technicians who maintain the life support systems, take priority over research codes. The protocol ensures that atmospheric personnel can seal a wing during a chemical spill or pressure breach without being overridden by researchers who might prioritize specimen access over crew safety. The protocol was never designed for this purpose, but it did not need to be. It gave custodial personnel atmospheric authority over research personnel. That is exactly what it did. Division Chief Korath Vel contacted the bridge. His mandibles were tight. His alarm pheromone was filling the corridor. He explained the situation in clipped, precise Serathi and requested a command-grade override. Second Commander Oveth Dran, the senior officer on watch, pulled the lockdown filing. He read it. He consulted the operations manual. He consulted the safety regulation code. He came back on the comm channel and said, in a tone I can only describe as carefully neutral, that the filing was procedurally valid, that the atmospheric deviations cited were within the mandatory response range, and that a command override of a valid maintenance lockdown required either evidence of filing fraud or a verified atmospheric emergency that superseded the custodial technician's assessment. Division Chief Korath Vel asked how long the recalibration would take. Second Commander Oveth Dran said the filing did not specify a completion time. Section 14 allows the custodial technician to maintain the lockdown until recalibration is complete, as assessed by the custodial technician. We stood in the corridor, 5 Serathi researchers producing alarm pheromone in a sealed space. The ventilation was circulating it. Researcher Kass's mandibles were locked. The junior technicians had retreated to the junction with the main corridor, where the air was cleaner. Division Chief Korath Vel stood before the sealed door with both manipulatory limbs pressed flat against his thorax, a Serathi posture that communicates either deep concentration or the effort of not breaking something. I accessed the containment wing's internal cameras from the corridor terminal. The data lines were still active. Technician Gale was inside the wing. He was seated at the atmospheric control station's maintenance console, which he had repositioned to face Chamber 12's observation panel. A sealed meal container was open on the console beside the monitoring displays. He was eating breakfast, the same kind of sealed ration he ate every shift, methodically, without hurry. On the console's primary screen, atmospheric readouts for all 12 chambers scrolled in real time. On the secondary screen, Specimen 12's biometric feed, cortisol analog, heart rate, respiration, vocalization frequency. Specimen 12 was at the observation panel. Its forelimb was against the barrier. Its vocalization was at 9 Hz. It was watching the human eat. The human's heart rate was 61 beats per minute. I switched the camera feed to the wider-angle lens and saw what the primary camera had not shown. The atmospheric control station's work surface held more than the meal container and the monitoring displays. Technician Gale had arranged his maintenance tools in their standard order: calibration wrench, sensor probe, filter gauge, deck cleaning kit. His thermos was in its usual position, to the right of his data pad. The data pad displayed the Serathi operations manual, open to Section 14. Beside the data pad, placed carefully on a folded cloth, was the small dark object I had seen him show the specimen weeks earlier, the worn, smooth disc from his personal effects. He was not improvising. He was not panicking. He had arranged his workspace for a shift because that is what this was, a shift. He was performing custodial maintenance during a valid atmospheric recalibration, and he was eating breakfast, and the organism in Chamber 12 was watching him eat, and the 9 Hz vocalization was steady and unbroken, and the atmospheric readings were slowly, methodically, precisely being brought within tolerance by a human who had 3 days to study exactly which numbers needed to move and by how much. On the adjacent camera, I could see the corridor outside the sealed door. The contrast was instructive. 5 Serathi researchers, 6 enforcement officers, 1 senior commander, 1 division chief, all producing involuntary alarm pheromone, mandibles locked, spiracles cycling at emergency frequency, standing in a cloud of their own chemical distress. On the other side of the door, one human, one predator, 9 Hz, 61 beats per minute, breakfast. At 07:15 the specimen shifted position. It moved from the observation panel to a spot on the deck approximately half a meter from the atmospheric console, closer to the human than it had been since the neural mapping sessions. It lay down, forelimbs flat, head lowered, sleep posture. It went asleep during the lockdown, while the corridor outside held 12 agitated Serathi and a pending vivisection order. The organism that every instrument in our containment wing classified as a high-hazard predator curled its forelimbs beneath itself and went to sleep because the human was there, doing what he always did, and the chemistry said safe. Division Chief Koreth Vel ordered the security team. 6 Serathi enforcement officers, standard loadout. They arrived in 14 minutes and stood in the corridor with us, adding their alarm pheromone to an atmospheric environment I would describe, in clinical terms, as counterproductive. Enforcement Officer Dren Savith contacted Technician Gale through the intercom. "This is Technician Gale. The containment wing is under atmospheric recalibration. I'll notify you when the procedure is complete." His voice was level, no pitch elevation, no tremor. No physiological stress markers. He sounded exactly as he sounded every other time I had heard him speak, quiet, precise, unremarkable. Officer Savith asked him to open the door. "I can't do that while recalibration is in progress. Section 14, subsection 3. The atmospheric parameters need to be within tolerance before I can release the lockdown." "When will they be within tolerance?" "I'm working on it." Officer Savith looked at Division Chief Koreth Vel. Division Chief Koreth Vel looked at me. I had nothing useful to contribute. The human was citing our own protocols with a precision I found difficult to characterize. At 07:30, I watched the camera feed. The human had not moved from the console. He had finished his breakfast and sealed the meal container. He was now running the atmospheric recalibration sequence, the actual recalibration, using the actual instruments, addressing the actual deviations cited in his filing. The humidity variance in chamber 12 was declining. The temperature fluctuation was narrowing. The particulate count was dropping as the cycling filters ran their cleaning protocol. He was doing the work. The lockdown was being used for its stated purpose. At 08:15, his voice came through the intercom. "I have water in here if anyone in the corridor needs it. There's a service port on the left side of the door, second panel from the floor. It's not covered by the lockdown." Nobody took the water. At 09:00, Second Commander Oveth Dran arrived in person from the bridge. He reviewed the filing. He reviewed the atmospheric data. He reviewed the operations manual citations. He spoke to Division Chief Koreth Vel and Officer Savith. He did not speak to me. He stood in the corridor for several minutes, mandibles cycling slowly, compound eyes tracking across the sealed door and the camera feed on the corridor terminal. At 09:30, he requested Technician Gale's personnel file from the exchange program coordinator. The file arrived at 09:34. I was standing close enough to see the screen when he opened it. Administrative page, assignment code, shift schedule, exchange program intake assessment, origin classification. Class 15, Oreth Sen, Kethvar system. Second Commander Oveth Dran looked up what Class 15 meant. Oreth Sen, high-gravity volcanic world. Surface temperature variance of 140 degrees across the seasonal cycle. Atmospheric oxygen at 31% at sea level, rising to 38% at inhabited altitudes. Continuous tectonic activity. 9 confirmed apex predator species per survey grid, 4 classified as sapient competitive. Recorded survey casualty rate for non-native personnel, 100% across 3 independent assessment expeditions, 41 individuals. Class 15 on the Interstellar Habitability Index, 20 tiers. The scale is exponential. A Class 15 world produces organisms whose metabolic baseline, stress tolerance, and physical resilience exceed the galactic median by a factor that the index represents as a single number. But that, in practice, means the organism's biology is calibrated to survive conditions that most spacefaring species would classify as a continuous emergency. A human from Orethsen does not produce alarm pheromones because there is nothing in a controlled shipboard environment that registers as threatening. The organism that might trigger such a response, Specimen 12, a 90-kilogram predator from a Category 19 world, registers on the Class 15 substrate as unremarkable, not harmless, not endearing, unremarkable. A thing that exists in the same space and does not require a response. The human was not brave. He was not performing courage. His biology did not classify the specimen as a threat, and therefore his body did not produce the markers that would signal danger to the specimen's own threat assessment system. He was warm, quiet, and chemically neutral. The specimen found in him something it had never encountered in captivity, a presence that did not trigger its defenses. Second Commander Oveth Dran closed the file. He stood in the corridor for 4 minutes without speaking. The alarm pheromone from the assembled Serathi was thick enough to taste. He told Officer Savith to withdraw the security team. Officer Savith asked for clarification. Withdraw your team. Return to standard posting. Log the incident as resolved. Division Chief Korath Vel began to object. He got as far as the word scheduled before Second Commander Oveth Dran turned to him and said, "I am recording this from memory, but I believe my recollection is precise. Division Chief, the custodial technician inside that wing is a Class 15 organism from a world that has killed every non-native survey team sent to assess it. He is inside a sealed compartment with a 90-kilogram predator that he has been tending for 3 months, and his heart rate has not exceeded 62 beats per minute since this morning. He has filed paperwork that is correct. He is citing protocols that are valid. He has offered us water. I am going to recommend that we accept the situation." The security team withdrew at 0952. Division Chief Korath Vel returned to the research deck at 10:15. The corridor emptied. The alarm pheromone began to dissipate. At 11:30, Technician Gale opened the containment wing door. The atmospheric recalibration was complete. His shift log read, "Atmospheric parameters recalibrated to within operational tolerances. All chambers nominal. Humidity sensor replaced, chamber 7. Camera lenses defogged, chambers 9 through 12. Nutrient dispenser cycling confirmed operational, all chambers." He filed the locked-on completion form, Form 14D, with the final atmospheric data attached. Both documents formatted correctly. He went to the maintenance galley for his midday meal. The vivisection was not conducted on day 98. It was not conducted on any subsequent day. Second Commander Oveth Dran listed the procedure as postponed pending comprehensive review that afternoon. The review committee included Oveth Dran, a Serathi behavioral specialist recalled from the Vethoreth regional station, and at the behavioral specialist's request, Technician Gale. I was not on the committee. I submitted my data, the behavioral observations, the stress correlations, the acoustic analysis, the camera footage, and was thanked for my contribution and excluded from deliberations. The exclusion was appropriate. I had been looking at the data for 98 days and had not understood it. The committee's summary stated that Specimen 12 would be transferred to a monitored ecological preserve on Thenvas's temperate southern continent, supervised by a Serathi veterinary team accompanied by 1 human custodial technician. The transfer preparation took 42 days. During those 42 days, Technician Gale remained assigned to the containment wing. No further procedures were conducted. No tissue sampling. No neural mapping. No sedation. The specimen was left in Chamber 12 with full nutrient provisioning, standard atmospheric maintenance, and the presence of one human custodial technician on a 6-hour shift cycle. I reviewed the data from those 42 days more carefully than I had reviewed anything in my career. The cortisol analog readings dropped below the initial acclimatization baseline, below, not to. The specimen's stress levels were lower than at any point since capture, including the calmest periods of the bond formation weeks. Its feeding was regular. Its vocalization stayed in the 9 Hz band. It slept in full view of the observation panel during every one of the human shifts. On day 131, 9 days before the transfer, Technician Gale did something I observed on the camera, but that does not appear in any official record because there is no form for it. During his break, seated on the corridor floor with his meal and his thermos, he spoke to the specimen. Not through the intercom system, not at research-audible volume. He spoke quietly, in a low register, in his own language, not Serathi, but the human tongue I had heard him use once when he was alone in the service alcove, speaking into a personal communication device during his off hours. I could not hear the words. The acoustic sensors registered the vocal output as a sustained pattern between 90 and 140 Hz, the conversational frequency band of a human adult male. The specimen was at the observation panel. It watched him speak. Its vocalization shifted. Researcher Kaas's instruments captured this to a pattern that mirrored the rhythm of the human speech. Not the frequency, not the content, the rhythm, the rise and fall, the pauses, the cadence. The organism was matching the temporal structure of the human's vocalizations with its own, the way one instrument matches another's tempo without sharing its key. I do not know what he said to it. I do not know if the content mattered. What mattered was that he said it, and that the organism responded, and that the response was something no Serathi researcher had ever observed in a captive specimen from any world in any survey rotation in the directorate's recorded history. The transfer was conducted on day 140. Technician Gale accompanied the specimen to the surface. He spent 4 days at the preserve, assisting with the acclimatization. The monitoring station reported that the organism's stress markers returned to capture baseline levels within 36 hours of release. Technician Gale returned to the Catherine Voss on day 145. He resumed his custodial duties in the containment wing. He filed his shift reports on time and without annotation. His personnel file was updated on day 150. The origin classification was unchanged, Class 15 Orath-Sen Kethvar system. The hazard annotation was revised. The old text, physiological resilience above median, no supplementary containment required, was replaced with a 12-digit assessment code and 3 lines I will reproduce. Protective bond capability, confirmed. Cross-species attachment formation, confirmed. Institutional override behavior under bonding threat, confirmed. Recommended handling protocol, do not threaten bonded subjects. We had spent 140 days studying Specimen 12. We had mapped its neural pathways, sampled its tissues, indexed its genome, its metabolic signature, its behavioral repertoire. We cataloged it with the thoroughness the Serathi directorate applies to organisms from 206 worlds. We did not catalog the human. He had been in the containment wing the entire time, cleaning deck plates, replacing sensors, defogging lenses, eating meals in the corridor. He placed his hand on a panel and held it there while a 90-kilogram predator pressed its forelimb against the other side. And when the institution moved to destroy the organism he had bonded with, he read the institution's own manual, found the correct form, and shut the door. No anger, no confrontation, no raised voice, no elevated heart rate. He filed paperwork. He cited protocols. He offered water to the people he was defying. The directorate published one paper from the Catherine Voss survey season, co-authored by the behavioral specialist and by Second Commander Oveth Dran, unusual, because command officers do not publish in xenobiological literature. The paper referenced cross-species attachment formation in deathworld origin substrates and the institutional implications of protective bond behavior. It did not reference Specimen 12 by name. The paper was about the human. I saw Technician Gale once more before he departed. He was in the containment wing, empty now, all specimens transferred, cleaning the observation panel on chamber 12. The chamber was powered down, nutrient dispensers removed, deck plates bare. He was cleaning the panel where the specimen had pressed its forelimb. I stood in the corridor. He knew I was there. Technician Gale. Sir, why did you do it? He set down his cleaning tool. He looked at me, binocular to compound, and I did not find it threatening. Because it was scared, he said, and it couldn't leave. He picked up the tool, he finished the panel, he filed his shift log. It read routine.